Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Heminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAoddsbreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by Five Dimes and Countermove, your home for fantasy MMA. I'm Brian Heminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC Fight Night 63 event, which takes place in Fairfax, Virginia. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on 5 total bouts. Briefly looking back at our last event, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 62 went 2-1 to profit 2.05 units overall. We won our underdog play on Freddie Serrano as well as our bet on the under 1.5 rounds total in the Eric Silva vs. Josh Koscheck fight. Unfortunately, our underdog bet on Drew Dober failed to cash after some controversial refereeing. Back to the present, UFC Fight Night 63 features a 10-fight card in total and will be aired on Fox Sports 1 this Saturday afternoon. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking off the preliminary card is a middleweight contest between Ron Stallings, who is 12-7 with 1 no contest, and Justin Jones, who is 3-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Well, first of all, a little disclaimer here. I'm fighting off a pretty rough cold, so if I sound a little bit different, that's why. But I'm going to fight through, and the show must go on, as they say. Starting off with this fight, Jones and Stallings. All lines are courtesy of our sponsor, 5dimes.eu, so check those guys out. I did open Jones minus 170, the comeback on Stallings plus 130. And right now, at the time of the recording, it's Jones minus 130 plus 110. So more action has been trickling in on Stallings. I mean, he is a pretty solid fighter, veteran of the sport for many years, coming off a loss to Hall. Didn't go the way he wanted in his official UFC debut, but that being said, I mean, he's obviously getting a second chance here against Jones, and this stylistically is probably a better matchup for him. So I can understand. I mean, Stallings is a pretty well-rounded veteran fighter that he's dependable as far as cardio. He has good cardio. He's hard to finish. He's always game and he's always in fights. So, and through his resume, I mean, if you look at it, he's fought some pretty solid competition along the way as well. So Stallings is no easy out by any means. And I can understand again why the support's coming in, because there's a lot of question marks still behind Justin Jones, no doubt about it. But that being said, I do think that Justin Jones is honestly the more talented of the two fighters. He's got more upside for sure. And now dropping down to 185, which he did make his debut in the UFC at 205 against Anderson, which he suffered his unanimous decision loss. But he was very game in that fight as well. I think 185 is going to be a lot better for him. He's getting a full camp here as well. So we should see a better version of Justin Jones than we did in the Anderson fight, which actually he was game in that fight as well. So this is a good matchup. I think that both these guys, you can make a point that, you know, either one of these guys can really pull off the W here. For me, I think Jones is the more effective striker. I like his boxing on the feet. He's got a ton of power. Jones actually has a little bit of underrated wrestling to go along with it, and he's got some sub skill as well. So Jones is a very complete fighter. The only problem with me with Jones is he does have a tendency to slow down. Now, again, in that Anderson fight, I know it was short notice, so wasn't expecting his cardio to be totally outstanding, but still, even before that, you could tell he does tend to slow in fights as the fight goes on. So cardio could be an issue with Jones a little bit, but other than that, I mean, there's a lot of upside to him. Like I said, I think he's an explosive, talented fighter that's only going to get better. His official record is 3-1 as a pro, but he's had more amateur fights that he's actually won. So he's beyond that. He's got a little bit more experience than his current record indicates. And I think, again, he's going to continue to improve, continue to get better, and he's going to be a threat at 185 for sure. And it's going to start here against Stallings. I do think that he's going to be a little bit too much for Stallings. I think Jones can rock Stallings a little bit on the feet. Stallings is hitting that spot of his career where he's a pretty solid fighter, but unfortunately, I think the best days are kind of behind Stallings as well. So I think eventually a decline will start hitting with Stallings. I'm not sure if we're going to see that here in this fight, but Still, I think Jones is kind of a dangerous fight for him. I think he should have advantages on the feet. Stallings isn't bad. Again, he's well-rounded everywhere, and he's got that veteran side of him that he's just a hard guy to finish, and his cardio is pretty solid. He could go 3 strong rounds. I know that as well. On the feet, he is a southpaw, so he does present some problems for Jones, no doubt about it, but I still think that Jones is going to pass his test. I think that Jones, again, can do some damage on the feet. I think Jones can also take the fight to the ground at times. Stallings' takedown defense overall is pretty solid, but I think Jones might have the better wrestling here as well. Stallings' clinch game is pretty nice. I think he's going to have maybe a slight advantage there, but overall I do give more ways for Jones to win this fight for sure. So I'm going to lean towards Jones. And again, he's just a slight favorite at this point, but I do think he comes away with a win. So my slight lean is towards Justin Jones getting the W here.
And while Justin Jones does have less experience than Ron Stallings, I do think that he's in a different place in his career than Stallings is. Stallings has competed 20 times professionally. Jones has taken significantly less damage throughout his career. And overall, I do think that Jones has a lot more upside. Stallings is a little bit on the downtrend in his career. And honestly, he only got this opportunity to compete in the UFC because they needed an absolute last-minute replacement, anybody that they could find to take on Uriah Hall, and Stallings stepped up. With Justin Jones, I think he's a guy that could have got to the UFC on his own without having to step in on short notice to take on Corey Anderson. So that's basically my opinion of how both fighters, their overall skills and where they are. And in terms of striking, Jones is definitely the more dangerous, more powerful guy. Stallings has a little bit of sneaky power, but he just is not a very technical striker, and his chin is not what it used to be. He also does get himself in some trouble. I mean, that fight against Uriah Hall, he got dropped. Granted, it was Uriah Hall, and then he got finished due to a doctor stoppage because of a nasty cut. With Jones, he hung in there against a guy that was a weight class ahead of him, bigger than him, and, actually was winning the fights for some parts. So I think if Justin Jones comes in with that same level of confidence against Ron Stallings, I think he could knock him out. Cardio is a bit of a concern, as Nick mentioned, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Maybe it could even be a live bet opportunity if Jones starts really strong but looked like he's slowing down. And I do feel like this is Justin Jones' fight to lose. The main thing here is he just has to avoid fading late or just try to put away Stallings while he's still fresh. So, as long as he can avoid getting put on his back or stuck in the clinch for the majority of the fight, then Justin Jones should be in pretty good shape here to do some serious damage with his striking. So my pick is Justin Jones. Now moving up to the heavyweight division, we have Shamil Abdurahimov, who is 15-2, taking on Timothy Johnson, who is 8-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened up Abdurahimov minus 270 and the comeback on Johnson plus 190. And line's kind of staying steady right now. At the time of the recording, it's minus 265 plus 225 for Abdurahimov as the favorite. So line basically tightened up a little bit. It seems to be staying steady for a reason. I mean, Abdurahimov definitely has, I think, overall an edge on Johnson. I think he's a little bit more technically sound, but these guys are very similar in a lot of ways. Starting off with Abdurahimov, obviously he's training with a lot of solid Russian heavyweights. He's from Russia, from that super camp that they developed over there. So he's definitely has some pretty decent training partners, which is good for him. He's a decent heavyweight prospect overall. He's well-rounded. His conditioning is very solid. A lot of times you can't say that about heavyweights, especially debuting heavyweights. So he's got that going for him as well. He does like to push a high pace. He's got some power on the feet, good clinch work to go along with it. Decent. And as far as his takedowns go, he's got decent trip takedowns, solid ground and pound when he does get you on the floor as well, and he can control you from the top. So a lot of good things about Abdurahimov for sure. But Johnson, you could really say a lot of similar things. I think Abdurahimov's a little bit further ahead, again, technically speaking, and maybe as far as well-rounded skill set goes. But Johnson's no slouch in his own right. I mean, he's a solid heavyweight prospect. He's a former Division II collegiate wrestler. So he's got a solid wrestling background. He's a very strong heavyweight. doesn't have the most technical skill set, but he does get it done in the cage, so you got to give him credit for that. On the feet, he likes to just throw bombs. He's a heavy-handed fighter for sure. He basically throws his punches, though, to close the gap and get inside the clinch, and he does have a pretty good clinch game. And that's one thing, again, that I think they have similarities, because I think Abdurahimov does some of his best work from the clinch. And you could say the same thing about Johnson. So it's going to be kind of a clinch battle back and forth, I think, here in this fight. So it might not be the most entertaining fight to watch, actually, but it should be a competitive, close type of fight that, these guys are definitely going to push each other and challenge each other for sure. Johnson's wrestling, it's okay, but it really should be a little bit better than it is as well overall. So I think that these guys are going to neutralize each other out. Again, I think there's going to be a lot of clinching up against the cage here, back and forth. And I think that really this fight is kind of up for grabs, but you do got to favor Abdurahimov because I think he is more technically sound. Again, I think he is training with a better camp overall as well. So I'm expecting him to look even better when he shows up in his UFC debut than he does on tape and on footage. So I do side with him. I think he is probably more times than not he's going to win this fight. As far as a bet goes, though, it's kind of tough, honestly, to bet this fight at all. But so be careful out there if you're throwing up Abdurahimov in parlays or whatnot as well, because Johnson's going to be game and he's going to show up here. So it might be a dog or pass situation, but at the same time, I am picking Abdurahimov because he is the better, more technically sound fighter.
And I agree. Abdurahimov is the more experienced fighter as well. He's fought 17 times professionally compared to Johnson's 9. And as Nick mentioned, with the fight camp that Abdurahimov trains with, those guys have some pretty legit Russian heavyweights. I mean, you got Alexander Volkov, the former Bellator heavyweight champion, and you also have Sergey Kharitonov, a guy that had a lot of experience in kickboxing, Pride, even Strikeforce. So he's going in there and banging with some pretty solid strikers, and I think that is sharpening up his skills. So he should be able to go in there, and I expect him to outstrike Timothy Johnson in open space. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but he should get the better of that situation. It is heavyweight MMA, and anything can happen. That's where it's very difficult to really be a strong, heavy favorite in the 265-pound division, just because there's so much power that anything can happen. And with Abdurahimov, I think the smartest thing for him to do is maybe keep it in open space and try to pick Johnson apart, or just close the distance and stay on the inside along the fence, because Johnson, he comes from a wrestling background. He doesn't use it very well, but at some point or another, almost every one of Johnson's fights ends up in the clinch. He has that Minnesota State background in wrestling and for a D2 school, but he does a good job of closing the distance and kind of making fights ugly. Like, it hasn't really been the prettiest performances to get to that 8-1 record. And while he did get a couple wins over some names like Travis Few and Kevin Asplund in his most recent fights, those aren't really top-of-the-line heavyweight contenders on the regional scene. So I don't think it's going to be the right kind of step up in competition to get him prepared for UFC. Abdurahimov is a guy that was on people's radars as far back as 3 or 4 years ago when big prospect lists were coming out. So I think that he hasn't fallen off. He just has kind of plateaued a little bit. So we'll see how he performs when he steps in there on Saturday. But I think that it's Abdurahimov's fight to lose. He's going to come in there mentally prepared, and I wouldn't be surprised if Timothy Johnson is just a little bit overwhelmed by the moment. So my pick is Abdurahimov. Now dropping all the way down to the lightweight division, we have Gray Maynard, who is 12-5-1 with 1 no contest, taking on Alexander Yakovlev, who is 21-6-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Well, there's definitely been some movement in this fight. Maynard, I opened -170 to come back on Yakovlev +130. And right now, it's actually Yakovlev -125 +105. So the line actually flipped. I guess everybody out there is fading Gray Maynard. I mean, he's looked not the same Gray Maynard that was fighting Frank Edgar for the title, that's for sure. I mean, he's looked pretty bad in his last few fights, no doubt about it. He's on a 3-fight losing skid. Even his fight against Clay Guida before those 3 fights that he just lost. A lot of people could argue that Guida, it was a controversial type of decision. A lot of people think that Guida actually might have won that fight as well. So he didn't even have his best performance against Guida. I know Guida, the style in that fight, he was moving around, kind of avoiding the fight. A lot of people thought so. It was difficult to catch Guida in that spot. But that being said, that was his only win in his last 5 fights. And that was even kind of sketchy. So I understand. I mean, everybody's pretty much thinking that Maynard is a shell of his former self. And, until he proves otherwise, I can understand it. He's lucky though in a lot of ways because, Yakovlev here in this spot, he's more of a grappling based fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter, of course. Another one of these Russian fighters. He's a southpaw. He's going to have a little bit of pure reach over Maynard, but on the feet, he's not a huge threat. He does have a little bit of power and he is getting a little bit better. So it wouldn't shock me if he catches Maynard and knocks him out because, Maynard's chin is looking pretty bad these days. So, but that being said, I think this is still a fight where Maynard is probably going to have a little bit, a better chance of surviving and not getting clipped. Because if you look at the competition he's faced recently, Maynard, he got knocked out by Pearson. He got knocked out by Nate Diaz. Even though Nate Diaz doesn't have a ton of power, you can still understand, the way Diaz fights, how he lost that fight. And then again, of course, he got knocked out by Grant. So Yakovlev isn't on that level as far as the tenacity and the killer type of fighter that you see on the feet. But that being said, again, with the decline, with the age, everything, it's still possible that he gets clipped and knocked out. Yakovlev's, I think, his best attribute is on the ground, getting the fight to the floor. His submission game overall is slightly underrated, especially offensively. He could definitely submit a lot of fighters, and when he gets top position, he's kind of hard to shake as well. And he's very smart. His fight IQ is very smart on the ground as well. So Yakovlev's a very talented fighter, but he just, I don't know. There's still, I think, a lot of things that hold him back. He needs to improve in a lot of areas. I think he needs to get a little bit more aggressive. He needs to get a little bit more confidence, and he needs to just keep on stepping up his game. So if he gets a win over Maynard in this spot, it's going to be a huge notch on his resume, and we could see him starting to step up his game from here on out. And of course, I should mention, he's dropping down to 155 from this fight. He's been fighting at 170, so that might give him a little bit of size and power that he needs to get the job done here against Maynard as well. So that's an interesting factor in this fight. But overall, I'm still leaning a little bit towards Gray because I think Gray, obviously, he's got the wrestling advantage in this fight. Even though Yakovlev has some decent underrated wrestling at times, he's still not going to be at the level of Maynard. So Maynard should be able to control where this fight takes place. He should be able to get top position. And if he avoids sub, then he should be able to kind of grind Yakovlev off here. And at the same time, if Maynard stays on the feet, he does have a lot of power. So offensively, Maynard, even though he hasn't looked that great striking, he could do some damage on the feet, no doubt about it as well. But I still think that Maynard's going to have to game plan smart, and he's going to have to utilize a game plan to get the W here, and his chin holds up, it's very possible. So I am still leaning towards Maynard here. I'm going to look at the weigh-ins and make my final decision. But for right now, I am leaning slightly towards Gray. I think this is a fight compared to the recent bouts that he's had that he could actually come through and pull off the W here. So my official pick as of now is going to be Gray Maynard.
Maynard went through a bit of a midlife crisis there, bouncing around gyms, leaving Extreme Couture after Randy retired, and I think that he's trying to get his head in the right place now because he's back in Las Vegas. He's back training with all his old buddies at Extreme Couture. He's leading the wrestling practices and everything. And I think that that's reinvigorated him a little bit. I don't think it'll reinvigorate his chin. You really can't just recover chin. We know about this. But at least going in there against Yakovlev, he's taking on somebody that's really not known for having big knockout power. Yakovlev, claims to have that big Russian hand-to-hand championship, but he hasn't shown much stand-up or striking skill in any of his UFC performances. And you'd think you would have seen it by now, considering he faced Nico Musoke and Damian Maia, 2 guys that aren't world beaters on the feet either. So going in there against Maynard, I actually think Maynard will probably have a slight striking edge, although I don't know how long he'll want to keep it standing. In terms of ground skill, Yakovlev is probably the better submission fighter, but Maynard, he's got that elite wrestling ability. He's used it throughout his entire MMA career, mixing in with the striking to keep his opponents off balance. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him do it again against Yakovlev. Yakovlev will be the bigger, taller, longer fighter, so it'll be very interesting seeing how he looks dropping down to the lightweight division. Like, honestly, he could be completely drawn out and look terrible. I mean, it's completely understandable. So I'll be definitely keeping an eye out on that. But overall, I think that you look at the people that have been knocking out Gray Maynard, and I just don't see Yakovlev being one of those guys. I mean, if Yakovlev wins, it's because he was able to get top position and keep Gray Maynard on his back. And nobody's really been able to do that unless they cracked Gray with a big shot beforehand. And I think maybe Gray has one last win in him before he starts to really tone down his career. And I really don't think he wants to end it from his UFC's perspective buried on the undercard. So I think Gray goes out there and takes care of business against Yakovlev and gets the win. So my pick is Gray. Now dropping down to the women's bantamweight division, we have Liz Carmouche, who is 8-5, taking on Lauren Murphy, who is 8-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Well, I opened Carmouche minus 155 to come back on Murphy plus 115, and action has come in a little bit more on Murphy, and it's now down to minus 115 Carmouche, minus 105 for Murphy. So basically a pick 'em with a slight lean towards Carmouche, and the betting action has been coming in a little bit more towards Carmouche recently as well. So the sports books are probably pretty even at this point, even though the line is smaller than what I originally opened it at. And they will continue to get two-way action, I'm sure. This is an interesting scrap for sure. I mean, both these girls are talented. I think both of them definitely are girls at 135 that are going to be tough outs for most people. So matching them up it's pretty good, I think, in this spot for both of them. I think it's a winnable fight, though, actually, for Murphy. And I can understand I'm leaning a little bit more towards her. I think that Carmouche, I mean, she's a wrestler. We know that she has a wrestling background. She's got some power on the feet. She's got nasty ground and pound when she gets the fight to the floor as well. Her submission game is decent offensively, at least. Of course, I mean, she had Ronda Rousey even in some trouble there early on. So that's impressive. And she could do a lot of good things. And she's the type of fighter that continues to improve overall. But what bothers me about Carmouche is her stand-up isn't really that good. I mean, she needs to be, I think, a little bit more active in her stand-up skills. She's got to have a little bit more confidence in her stand-up as well. And a lot of times when the fight is tough, she tends to start kind of closing up shop a little bit and not throwing as much or not getting as active as you'd like to see from her. And I think Murphy, you're not going to have those problems with Murphy. I think Murphy's the type of fighter that's going to maintain a consistent aggression. And for 3 rounds, she's going to be able to, I think, fend off some of the takedowns. I know a lot of people are probably picking Carmouche because they saw, the fight with Murphy and McMahon recently, and McMahon was able to get Murphy to the ground and control a little bit. I think McMahon has better wrestling than Carmouche, though. That's the difference maker in this fight. I think even though Carmouche might have a wrestling edge over Murphy in this spot, I don't think she's going to be able to physically dominate Murphy like McMahon did. And I mean, obviously, let's face it, even that McMahon fight, Murphy from the bottom did enough damage to make it interesting, at least on the judges' scorecards. That's not saying much because judges are awful, as we all know these days. But that being said, I think Carmouche is still going to have difficulties getting this fight to the ground and maintaining that top position and dropping those bumps. So if it stays up on the feet, I think Murphy has a very underrated striking game, to be honest with you. I think if you look close, she could be a very effective striker. Again, she's a little bit more active. She picks her spots well. She's pretty accurate. I think she has some really good knees from the clinch, and she does very effective work actually from the clinch as well. She's very powerful in that aspect. So I think the stand-up edge actually goes to Murphy. I think the wrestling edge, you give a slight nod to Carmouche, but maybe not enough to actually, win the fight for her in this spot. And then as far as conditioning and cardio goes, I know both of them are fairly decent in that area, but I still think that, again, Carmouche tends to not get as active as you want and lets other fighters, aggressive fighters, push the pace at times. So I think that plays to Murphy's hands. I think Murphy's going to be the one pushing the pace for 3 steady rounds, and she's going to probably get the nod here. More times than not, obviously, this fight's going to go the distance, and it's going to be a close decision, but I do lean towards Murphy, so I can understand the early action coming in that way, because I am picking Murphy to win as well. I think this is a good matchup for her, and I think she's going to come through.
Both of these ladies have similar strengths. Both of them are very physical. Liz Carmouche is definitely more based on top control, with her overall attack. I mean, she just wants to drag opponents to the ground, get on top of them, and just start beating the hell out of them. With Lauren Murphy, she can do that, but her wrestling isn't quite good enough to consistently be able to make that her primary attack. So Murphy relies on a lot of pressure. And the other thing that's really helped Lauren Murphy throughout her career is the tremendous amount of heart that she has. She has taken some beatings in fights and then just kept going and just never given up and just refusing to lose. And it's really been beneficial for her. She gains a lot of confidence from that, and she will go forward and try to just force her opponent to bend to her will. And a lot of the times it's been able to work for her. And that's how she was able to start off her career 8-0, including that huge upset over Nakamura. So, Lauren Murphy is not somebody that you should just be sleeping on. But that being said, Liz Carmouche does have more experience against the elite of the women's bantamweight division. And one thing that you do have to look out for is, especially early with Liz Carmouche fights, because once she gets on top of you and starts dropping some punches, you're in trouble. You saw that with Jessica Andrade, and while unfortunately Liz has not been able to pick up another win in the UFC, she's 1-3 in the promotion at this moment. She has faced some very top-notch competitors. I mean, you look, it's Miesha Tate, it's Alexis Davis, and Ronda Rousey. And that's going to be tough for anybody to beat any of those three right now. So, overall, I was a little bit concerned with how Sarah McMahon was able to relatively easily drag Lauren Murphy to the ground. And I can see Liz doing that for at least the first round. I don't know if she'll be able to keep it up, because for some reason she's not always able to make a sustained offensive attempt. But I could potentially see Liz winning the first 2 rounds here. I don't see her finishing Lauren by any stretch of the imagination. She's just too tough. But a decision is possible. It's not crazy likely, and I'm barely leaning in Carmouche's direction, but she is going to be my pick. Now, kicking off the main card for UFC Fight Night 63, we have a lightweight contest between Dustin Poirier, who is 16-4, and Carlos Diego Ferreira, who is 10-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted at things so far?
I opened Poirier -150, the comeback on Ferreira +110, and right now looking over the line at 5 dimes, is Poirier -185, the comeback on Ferreira is +160, so a lot more support coming in on Poirier. Not really that surprised me. He's a popular fighter. He's a great fighter. I mean, throughout his career, he's fought basically the who's who at 145, and now, of course, he's moving back up to 155, which is interesting for sure. Poirier is always game. I mean, the guy's a phenomenal fighter, a well-rounded fighter, an aggressive fighter, a finisher. He's got a lot of things to love about him. Now, of course, he got kind of destroyed by Conor McGregor, so he's coming, up to 155, kind of get a fresh start for him. There's a lot of question marks, I think, though, still with Poirier at this point. I mean, his chin has always been a tad bit suspect. He's pretty strong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's got a weak chin, but he has been tagged and rocked throughout his career, even though he's only got one official knockout loss on his resume, and again, that was to McGregor. Defensively, he does get tagged. I mean, offensively, he's fun to watch, and he's very effective, but he does have some defensive flaws, and Ferreira is a very, very game and dangerous opponent. I know a lot of people are probably not as high on Ferreira right now because, he's coming off that loss to Dariush, and he just got, basically dominated. Not overly dominated, but he got grinded out for 3 strong rounds against Dariush. Poirier has some solid wrestling as well as far as how they match up. So he could be looking for some takedowns along the way and try to copy and duplicate Dariush's game plan against Ferreira. I just don't think he's going to have enough success. I don't think he's going to be able to control Ferreira like Dariush did as well. So I think we're going to see this fight play out a little bit everywhere. And I think a lot of it is going to play out on the feet. And if that's the case, I think Poirier is going to be in a little bit of trouble because, again, offensively, he's very talented and effective, but I think Ferreira's skill on the feet, he has some power. He's aggressive as well. He's, I think, a little bit more precise, and I think that he could do some damage. regardless of where the fight takes place. And then, of course, Ferreira is a BJJ black belt. He's phenomenal on the ground. Obviously, if you could put him on his back and avoid the submissions and avoid him scrambling out of the bottom, like Darius was able to do, you could beat him. But again, I don't think Poirier is going to have that kind of success. So I think this fight's going to kind of go back and forth. It's a very close fight. But I am going to lean towards the underdog Ferreira here. I think physically he's going to be in his natural weight class of 155, of course. And Poirier, again, is moving back up. So I think that gives a slight edge to Ferreira on the feet as far as power goes. And I think he's going to be able to, again, stuff some takedowns along the way. His sub game is dangerous enough that he might even catch Poirier along the way. Poirier has a good sub game, but I think defensively Ferreira's a little bit better there as well. So in my opinion, Ferreira has more ways to win this fight. He can win on the cards. He can win by stoppage. So I'm going to pick Ferreira to win this fight.
And I can see your reasoning here, but I think that Dustin Poirier has a decent shot of pulling this off. The main thing is Poirier's moving back to 155. It's not like he's moving up a weight class for the first time. I mean, he started his career as a lightweight. He even debuted in the WEC as a lightweight. He did lose to Danny Castillo there, so that is a concern. So that kind of shows, maybe a little bit of his skill level as a lightweight. And he is showing a bit of a decline in terms of his durability. That's probably my number one concern with Dustin Poirier right now. He has been dropped or rocked or hurt in a lot of his recent fights. And while Carlos Diego Ferreira isn't a world beater on the feet, he does have some pop. We saw that in his knockout of Ramsey Nijem. He looked really good on the feet there. And he could definitely connect with Poirier because Poirier's striking defense is not very good. And he does absorb a pretty good amount of shots per minute. So there's a decent chance that even though Dustin Poirier probably wants to keep this on the feet, that he could be at a slight disadvantage just because he can't be able to trade evenly with Ferreira. He's going to have to probably land 2 for every 1 he takes. Now, in terms of ground game, I do think Poirier has the better wrestling, and he has a very good ground game in his own right. He's pulled off some pretty nifty submissions in the UFC, but I do think Carlos Diego Ferreira has a slightly better ground game in terms of submissions and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. But Poirier could neutralize him on the ground just like Darius did, and you can't discount experience. Dustin Poirier has faced some of the best featherweights in the world, and I think that the people that he's faced are definitely comparable and probably better than just about everybody that Carlos Diego Ferreira has faced in his career. So, and moving back up to lightweight, he's not losing a lot of size because Poirier did cut a lot of weight to make the featherweight limit, and Carlos Diego Ferreira is not a huge lightweight by any means, so they're both about the same height. Maybe Ferreira has a slightly better reach, but it's not like he knows exactly how to use it that well. So this is going to be a very competitive fight, but I'm slightly leaning Poirier. All right, Reed. Now, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I think I agree with you guys that this is a pretty tough one to call. And although Poirier looks good on paper, the move up in a weight class is a big question. He will not be the bigger fighter in this matchup as he has been a lot in the past at featherweight. And he has had a lot of accuracy, very good accuracy performances, but he's eaten a lot of punches. And that's a concern that you guys have pointed out. He's only truly officially been dropped once, but he has looked hurt in the past, and I think that's contributed to some of his performances where he lost. And so facing a bigger guy who is powerful, Ferreira, even though he's primarily just style-wise a grappler, he has looked pretty good. Now, in terms of exchanges, I think Poirier does get the edge just in terms of the technical exchanges. But as you guys pointed out, the power is something to concern. You know, he could be playing with fire if he just tries to turn this into a striking duel. But that's not really his style. He actually likes going to the mat. He's been on the mat a lot. He's looked fantastic there with some great submissions, but he's also been defeated there. And if he is willing to play on the mat with Ferreira, that could backfire for him. Ferreira obviously is no joke, very high level black belt jiu-jitsu. So, the numbers do slightly lean Poirier, but that's not with confidence, especially moving up a weight class. So given where the line is, I can understand there's some uncertainty here. I think that will keep the line fairly close. There are paths to victory for both guys. And I just see some risk going for Poirier, and I wouldn't be able to support him, going up in the weight class until I see him perform there. So, there is a case to be made, I think, that agrees with you guys. This is probably dog or pass, and, maybe keep an eye on where that line goes.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now, dropping down to the featherweight division, we have Guida, who is 31-12, taking on Robbie Peralta, who is 18-5 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Well, I opened Guida minus 230 to come back on Peralta plus 170, and right now it's Guida minus 250 plus 210. So just a little bit more movement or action coming in on Guida, but not a whole lot. This is a tough fight. I mean, if this was, obviously a few years ago, Guida would be a much larger favorite, honestly. It's at the point where, in my opinion, Guida's had so many fights in the UFC against quality competition, of course, obviously at lightweight now, even at 145. He's faced some good competition as well. So he's been a stud for such a long time. And even though he's only 33 years old, in fight years, he's way beyond that. And of course, he ended up getting clipped on the feet. In the last few fights, he's been getting caught on the feet a little bit and rocked. Then Bermudez was able to choke him out in his last fight too. So he's coming in off of 2 out of 3 losses. Of his last 3 fights have been losses. So he's coming in on a little bit of a decline type of a spot, I think. He's faced quality competition again, but there's a lot of question marks behind Guida. Now, that being said, Peralta, of course, one of his biggest flaws is, he's got so much talent, so much potential, but, the ground, he can get beat on the ground a little bit. The type of pace that people like to push against him kind of backfires and works against him as well. So it's basically either he's going to win by knockout or there's a good chance he could lose by decision, it seems like, for Peralta. But he is such an effective striker and he's got so much power on the feet that he's always dangerous when it does stay upright. And he's capable of knocking people out. Obviously, that's how he got most of his wins. So Peralta, a game opponent. And what makes this a hard fight to even actually pick is, obviously we know Guida's going to come in looking for the takedowns. If he struggles with the takedown, Peralta keeps it on the feet, I think Peralta is going to be able to knock him out. But the problem with Peralta is if Guida does have success taking him down, which Guida has taken down some of the best in the UFC, some guys with really good takedown defense along the way as well. So it's possible that Guida does get this to the floor. Guida could take his back, possibly sub Peralta, or just kind of grind him out if his chin does hold. So I'm going to pick Guida because I think you got to kind of slightly go towards the wrestler in this spot because, his game plan, his style, what he's going to bring to the table. Of course, he's also training with alpha male now. Guida has been. So that's only going to kind of, I think, rejuvenate his career a little bit. He's going to have a different perspective on things. I think that'll give him maybe a little bit more confidence coming into this fight as well. And again, training with some of the best lighter weight class guys doesn't hurt at all either. So I'm picking Guida, but it's not a confident pick because if he doesn't get this fight to the floor, he could get knocked out. So as far as the betting line goes, I don't know. I think it is kind of a dog or pass situation. But it's kind of tough knowing that Peralta's flaws are, again, most of them come on the ground. So I'm picking Guida, but not a confident pick.
Guida is at a point in his career where he is on a bit of a decline. He has not been able to string wins together. He dropped down to featherweight after losing 2 in a row and not looking very good at lightweight. And he hasn't looked that great at featherweight either. The super close win over Hachihioki that clearly could have gone the other way. And then his only other win was against another veteran in Kawajiri. And his 2 losses, he got destroyed by Chad Mendes and finished by Dennis Bermudez. So, this is a guy that barely ever got finished in his career, and it's happened in 2 of his last 3 fights. Granted, against 2 of the better guys in the division, but that's who he has always been stepping in there against for top guys. And when Guida is on, he's on. He doesn't come from this crazy NCAA wrestling pedigree, but he was able to use some good movement and wrestling and top control to stifle and defeat the last 2 guys that fought for the lightweight title in Anthony Pettis and Rafael Dos Anjos, the current champ. So he is definitely capable of smothering Robbie Peralta and just completely neutralizing everything about him. and I would not hold it against Clay if he was able to do that. Robbie, on the other hand, he is definitely one of that all-or-nothing type of guy where he's not the most technical striker, but he does have good power. He gets a lot of knockdowns. He's very dangerous. And at this point in Clay's career, he has to be careful around this guy because his chin isn't what it used to be. So if Peralta connects with something really solid, Guida could be in a bit of trouble. Now, what this fight's entirely going to boil down to is, will Clay Guida get inside? Will Clay Guida be able to put Robbie Peralta on his back and keep him there? And I think that with the new environment where he's training with Team Alpha Male and Glendale, leaving Jackson's where he said he wasn't getting the one-on-one attention that he was hoping for, I think that it'll do a good thing here for Guida. So while he hasn't looked great as of late, neither has Robbie Peralta. Peralta got completely dominated by Thiago Tavares in his last fight, and I think that Clay Guida could potentially pull this one off with a top control. He might even get a submission finish. So my pick is Clay Guida. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, there are some reasons to be worried about Clay Guida, and you've mentioned a few of them. First of all, this guy, he's been hit or miss lately. You look back, you saw him get dominated by Gray Maynard. Gray Maynard, his only win in 5 years is against Clay Guida, and Gray Maynard's way down on the undercard of this same event. So here's Clay Guida. He's been in the UFC a long, long time. He's now taken 785 total head strikes in his UFC career, nearly 400 of those standing punches and kicks to the head. That is far more than anyone else on this entire card. So there is reason to be worried about how he might perform in the stand-up game, because Robert Peralta is a headhunter. This guy is, he's not exceptionally technical, but he is very powerful. He's scored 5 knockdowns already in his not very long UFC career. So if this stays standing, there is a lot of reason to think that Clay Guida could be in trouble. But let's also talk about the wrestling. Guida was a wrestler first. He got away from it for a while, but his ground control stat is quite good. 82% of the time when he is on the mat, he's in control. Consider Peralta is only 20% when he's on the mat. He is clearly not the wrestler that Clay Guida is. And Guida was able to shut down talented strikers in the past. That is definitely his best path to victory, is to turn this into a wrestling match. It may not be pretty if he does go that route, but he clearly has the skill set to control this and keep it on the ground. Robbie Peralta, his takedown defense is actually pretty good. I think other people know that he's dangerous with his hands, and his takedown defense is 70%, which is above average. And Clay Guida isn't necessarily highly successful with his takedowns. It's more of a continuous attack. He just attempts a lot of them, 146 of them in his UFC career. So while he only lands them with average success, he eventually will get it there. So I do see risk, especially where the line is currently. These are stylistically very different fighters. Peralta is going to be bigger, younger, more powerful, more resilient and durable. So there's all the reasons to believe that he wins this on the feet, whereas Clay Guida wins this on the mat. And so question is, how long does it take to for Guida to get the fight down, and can he get it down, and can he keep it there? So while sometimes you just got to defer to wrestling to trump other styles, based on the current price, that's quite a premium to be paying. So I would be careful about playing Guida, and might even see some value on a Peralta by TKO prop or something like that. But certainly this is a stylistic mismatch, and we'll see if there's any value left on Guida once things shake out.
Now dropping down to the women's bantamweight division again, we have Julianna Pena, who is 6-2, taking on Milana Dudieva, who is 11-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Pena minus 305 to come back on Dudieva plus 225, and right now it is actually Pena minus 270 plus 230. So line margins basically tighten up a little bit, and there are, the books are getting a little bit more two-way support in this fight as well. a lot of that has to do with Pena's, obviously her leg injury or knee injury. I mean, she's been out for over a year now, and that was a devastating injury. And a lot of people were just kind of shocked the way everything happened with her. So there's question marks around Pena. We got to answer that right away. I mean, we're not sure how well she's going to look. Obviously, I mean, you got to think that she's going to be okay. I mean, to be in this spot here, and she's going to be capable of performing the way she has in the past before the injury. Hopefully that's the case for Pena, because I would hate to see her, show up here and look terrible, because, I mean, the girl has a ton of talent. Obviously, she's a former Ultimate Fighter winner. She's a great grinder. I mean, her strength is getting the fight to the floor, controlling a position, getting dominant position, dropping some good, solid, steady ground and pound, looking for the sub as well. So Pena does her best work on the ground. Her stand-up's not too bad. I mean, it's still a work in progress. It's developing, but she does have a little bit of power on the feet too. And what I like about it, man, her heart, her fight IQ overall, she has the will to win. I mean, she shows up and she'll do whatever it takes to get the job done and get that W too. So she's relentless as far as that goes. Now, Dudieva, on the other hand, is a fairly well-rounded competitor in her own right. I mean, again, she's another one of these Russian fighters that's game. She's got a ton of experience overall throughout her career, and she's a very, again, well-rounded fighter. I mean, on the feet, I don't think she's a huge threat at all. She needs to get a little bit more KO power, develop a little bit more, but let's face it, you don't see that very often in women's fights. They don't seem to end by knockout as often as you'd like to see at times, but Dudieva's strength, I think, is, again, kind of her ground game. She has a decent clinch game, but I think getting top position, looking for subs again, is what Dudieva's going to want to do. But it's going to be tough against Pena. She's going to probably find herself on her back. And from her back, she has capable armbar submissions, triangles, that type of thing as well. Even heel hooks. She does go for subs, but I think Pena's going to be game and smart enough to avoid a lot of that stuff. And again, Pena, I think, could kind of neutralize Dudieva's attack and her submission attack on the ground, and Pena can drop some bombs along the way, control the tempo of the fight. She's going to be the aggressor in this fight, I think, as well. So she should be able to at least, get the nod here by decision. If not, potentially even maybe get a submission finish as well along the way, because Dudieva, even though she has a pretty slick ground game, she has been subbed a couple times throughout her career, and I think Pena's one of these type of fighters that she does look for a dominant position on the ground, and if Dudieva starts scrambling, maybe Pena gets her back and, sinks in the choke or something like that as well. So I'm expecting a fairly competitive fight between these two, but I think that it's a fight that it's really Pena's to win or lose here. So hopefully, again, she's recovered 100% from her injuries, and she's going to come back here and show that she belongs, and she's a threat at 135 for sure, and a future possible title contender. So my official pick is going to be Pena. I think she's just simply the better fighter at this point. She's got more upside as well, and she should get the job done more times than not.
Pena is definitely more than just a pretty face. She has some talent. I'll completely admit I underestimated her on The Ultimate Fighter Season 18, but I did not underestimate her by the time it was her chance to fight for the actual Ultimate Fighter crown and the six-figure contract. She looked incredible, and she completely dominated her opponent, Rakosi, and I could see her at that point being someone that could be fighting for a title someday. Unfortunately, she had that horrific knee injury. I mean, she had, you name it, in her knee, she tore it. And she's been out ever since. That happened in January of 2014, so it's been a little over 14 months since Pena last was, since she got hurt. And that's a devastating knee injury, and I believe that should be enough time for it to recover. But there's all kinds of lingering issues there. Will she have the same explosiveness? Will she be able to push off? Will she be able to drive through with takedowns? Will she be able to, land with better strikes on the feet? And then, of course, there's the mental side of it. Does she trust her knee? When training, does she trust it? Will she panic if she gets put in a heel hook or something? Like, those are all kinds of things you got to take into consideration. So overall, this one is probably a fight that you have to pass on just because you got to see how Julianna Pena looks before you can actually try to throw some money on her side. So Dudieva, realistically, if Pena had no knee injury whatsoever, like she would have zero chance, in my opinion. Absolutely zero. She's not as good of a striker as Pena, and she's definitely not as good on the ground as Pena, and when she has faced some pretty solid ground fighters like Jessica Andrade, she got submitted. So I do see Julianna Pena getting this fight to the ground. I see Julianna Pena getting on top position, securing a dominant position, and at some point probably finishing this fight. Dudieva is overall just one of those jack of all trades, masters of none. Nothing really super scary in her skill set, and she really didn't look that impressive in her UFC debut against Elizabeth Phillips. I mean, that fight could have gone either way. And I think that Julianna Pena makes a statement here in her return and instantly becomes a fresh face again in the UFC women's bantamweight division. So my pick is Julianna Pena. Now moving up to the lightweight division, we have Michael Chiesa, who is 11-2, taking on Mitch Clark, who is also 11-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Up in Chiesa minus 350, the comeback on Clark plus 250, and right now over at 5 times it's minus 350 plus 290, so line margins kind of tighten up a little bit. And of course, Chiesa's in, I'm sure, several parlays out there for most of you guys as well. So even though the line is staying steady, a little bit more support still coming in on Chiesa here in this spot. And, I can understand it. I mean, he's looked really good. He's one of these type of fighters that continues to improve his game. Of course, we know what he likes to do. He likes to take the fight to the floor. He likes to control people. He likes to look for his sub game, which, of course, he gets around your neck. You're pretty much done. I mean, that's how dangerous this guy is on the ground with his jiu-jitsu and his chokes. And he's always a threat. But you can say a lot of the same things about Clark. I mean, he has a very underrated grappling game. That's his best attribute as well. So even if Chiesa wants to get this fight to the floor and gets top position on Clark, Clark's going to be very game. Of course, he's got that huge, Clark has that huge upset win over Iaquinta that was kind of shocking because Iaquinta was dominating that fight before he got caught in that choke as well. So, but that proves how dangerous Clark could be even off his back. Now, Chiesa and Clark, I think the best way they match up, or the best method of victory for Chiesa, is actually trying to keep this fight on the feet and not go for too many takedowns. I think his striking has improved enough that he's actually going to have some advantages on the feet. It is going to be a close fight. I think, honestly, the line's probably a tad high, and this is a closer matchup than we all think, because Clark, he's been training with the MMA lab now for a little bit longer. He's getting better as well. He's just not one of these popular guys that the MMA bettors like to get down on, honestly. So line a little bit inflated for Chiesa, and it should be a closer matchup. But that being said, I still think there's several advantages for Chiesa in this fight. Again, one of them being that his stand-up game continues to improve. I think he could probably get top position on Clark as well. I think his sub-defense is better than Iaquinta's, so he probably won't get caught in nothing crazy like that either. But it is a competitive fight, so I'm expecting both these guys to continue to improve. They get better and better. Both training at solid camps. I obviously favor Clark's camp a little bit more. So we'll see. It depends on the game plan. It depends on who shows up or whatnot, but I think you do have to lean towards Chiesa a little bit more in this spot. And again, more so than not, I think it's because his stand-up should trump Clark's stand-up in this spot as well. So my official pick is going to be Chiesa.
And I agree relatively. The main thing for me is the stand-up, because on the ground, it's a bit of a wash. I'll give a slight edge to Mitch Clark in terms of actual submission ability, and then an edge to Chiesa for his wrestling ability. But on the feet, while Chiesa wasn't a world beater in The Ultimate Fighter, he has made some great strides since the show, and he's actually been able to hold his own against most people in the stand-up portion. And that's just not something he was able to do originally. Mitch Clark, on the other hand, is about as bottom-of-the-barrel striking as it gets. He just does not have a lot of power. He doesn't look comfortable in the stand-up, and that's why it was so surprising that he was able to pull off that win against Iaquinta, because everyone was like, why would Iaquinta even shoot in for a takedown against this guy? Just keep it standing and light him up. But he didn't, and hopefully Michael Chiesa learned a lesson here from Iaquinta's mental lapse. And with Mitch Clark, it's been a bit of a long layoff since that last fight. It was about a little over 10 months now. So I think that he will have some ring rust, and Chiesa could take advantage of that. If Clark starts off slow, I can see Chiesa landing some really big bombs on the feet, and he might even be able to put Clark away. We did see Clark get finished in his UFC debut, so it's very possible that if Chiesa connects with something solid, that he could do it too. He just has to be wary of the ground game, and I think that he has a good enough fight IQ to try to avoid what Mitch Clark is best at, which is the grappling. So my pick is Michael Chiesa. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I feel like when I look at Mitch Clark's stats, he's not really living up to his reputation. I know a lot of people have respect for his fight game, and then on paper, his stats look pretty bad, actually, in terms of at least the striking technical merit. When I line these two guys up, Mike Chiesa has advantages all the way down the line, almost, in every single metric. So Mitch Clark, he comes out with a very high pace, but his accuracy has been terrible and his defense has been also terrible. So in terms of technical striking, it doesn't look good. He's going to be at a southpaw disadvantage. He's going to be outranged by Chiesa. So even though he is capable of putting up a lot of volume, Chiesa should have the better hands if these two guys stand toe to toe. Now, both of them love to attempt takedowns. They attempt a lot of takedowns, not with the best accuracy, which usually goes hand in hand. People who attempt a lot, it's because they have to if they're not landing them on the first try. And so both of them do like going to the mat. But again, Chiesa, at least on his performance metrics, has simply performed better. He's advanced more position. His takedown defense is better. He spent more time in control and attempted more submissions than Mitch Clark. And so Clark, he has actually not been in control very much when he was on the mat. Even though he does have, I think, a career of some submission wins, he just hasn't been putting that together in the UFC octagon. So I do see, at least on paper, it shows up with a lot of strong advantages for Chiesa here. So I would favor him. He just has been getting it done more so than Mitch Clark. And I think also the level of competition that he's faced is also a little bit better in terms of the grappling. I think he did get submitted by Jorge Masvidal, which is, that guy's no joke. And Mitch Clark did get a win over Iaquinta. Both those guys are obviously fighting higher on this weekend's card. So the MMA math here kind of blurs the picture, and yet the performance metrics are very clearly in favor of Chiesa. So I would cautiously lean his way. I think probably the price may be getting a little too outlandish because a lot of insiders do really think that Clark is underrated. So I would be careful with that, especially, maybe keep an eye on the price, but I'm leaning Chiesa and would pick him. I'm not sure I would want to pay this much for him, though.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now, sticking with the lightweight division, we have the co-main event of the evening between Jorge Masvidal, who is 28-8, and Iaquinta, who is 11-3-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Masvidal opens -190. The comeback on Iaquinta +150. Tons of value at the +150 spot out there, obviously for most people, so they jumped all over it, and the line has since dropped down significantly to near pick'em, actually, with Masvidal now -135, +115. So basically the comeback went from +150, now it's down to +115. This is a tough spot. I mean, you know what? The line opened a little bit higher for Masvidal because of, honestly, his overall skill set, and it's hard to gauge the hype or popularity of Iaquinta because, even against a guy like Ross Pearson, nobody really pretty much thought he'd win that fight, and everybody was kind of going the other way against Pearson. But other times, they do support Iaquinta, and he's a heavy favorite. So I guess it all really does depend on matchups, and I honestly figured that this would be a spot where a lot of people don't really believe in Iaquinta as far as skill set for skill set. A lot of people talk about Iaquinta's fight IQ, which is definitely a problem at times. And everybody would kind of come in on Masvidal. So the line now, where it is, I think is a little bit more reasonable, honestly, than even my opener. So I opened it too high for sure. But that being said, this is a tough spot. It is a very tough fight. These guys match up well. I think they're two of the best at 155 in a very stacked division. Both these guys have skill. Both these guys could make a run towards the title. So this is a great matchup. For me on the feed, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be very close. Masvidal has great striking. He's technical. He's got power. He's smart. He's got a pretty good chin. I know a lot of people are going to say he's been dropped and rocked and knocked out even before in the past, but he recovers fairly quickly. And defensively, though, it is a problem. I mean, you don't want to see somebody get tagged as often as he does, and he seems like he's dropped at least once per fight. Obviously that's not the case, but it seems like it. I mean, he gets dropped quite a bit, but he does recover really fast, and more times than not, he starts taking control, and that almost wakes him up when he does get dropped or rocked or whatever, and he starts picking up the pace. Now, I don't know if he's going to be able to do something like that against a guy like Iaquinta. Iaquinta has tons of power on the feet, a little bit underrated actually, but now I think people are starting to give Iaquinta that kind of respect, and they realize how good his boxing really is. So if he rocks Masvidal, and especially with MMA judging these days, or I should say MMA refereeing these days, you never know what the referee's going to maybe jump to the gun and stop a fight too quick and not leave and let Masvidal recover or whatnot. That's always a possibility in the back of my head. And Iaquinta's just so strong that he could put Masvidal out. So Iaquinta definitely has a shot, especially if it remains on the feet, to get through and land some heavy shots on Masvidal. But again, Masvidal is not a weak striker in his own right. And Iaquinta, you can say a lot of the same things about his defense. I mean, Iaquinta, in my opinion, gets tagged a little bit too much as well. Now, the guy does have a very solid chin. He's able to absorb a lot of that punishment. I don't think he, gets rocked as easily as Masvidal does. He just seems to tough through it, and he does bleed quite a bit. So, I mean, he always gets a bloody nose in his fights. He always gets tagged like that, but he just pushes through and he ends up being very effective. So, on the feet, it's going to be a very competitive battle, but I think you do got to give kind of the slight edge to Iaquinta on the feet. Now, Masvidal's favorite, though, because I think he's favored because he's a little bit more well-rounded and he has more ways to win this fight. Masvidal's submission game is severely underrated. He only has a couple official subs on his resume, but the guy is sneaky smart with the sub game. He's got pretty solid wrestling. Now, Iaquinta's hard to take down. I know that people have had some success against him in the past, but his takedown defense overall is very solid. So I don't think Masvidal is going to have a ton of success taking him to the ground. But Iaquinta, again, going back to the fight IQ at times, I think he wants to keep this fight upright and, bang it out a little bit with Masvidal here. But at times he shoots in for takedowns and gets himself in spots that you don't want to see. So it's possible Masvidal does catch him in a sub along the way as well. I think if it hits a scorecard, it's going to be a very competitive fight, almost a split decision type of fight that could realistically go either way. But I think Masvidal does have more advantages in this fight. I mean, he's been in, again, overall throughout his career, he's been in with the best of the best. He's very motivated. He keeps on. What it is, for me, I love seeing guys that have been in the sport for a long time that are actually improving their game and taking things more serious, training more serious, their cardio is improving, their skill set overall is improving, and they become more dominant. And that's a guy like Masvidal. I mean, he's been in the game for a long time, but this is actually the best Masvidal we've seen, which is hard to say because a lot of times, well, look at the Guida situation. He's been in the sport we just mentioned for a while, and he is kind of hitting that decline spot. Well, that's not the case for Masvidal. I think the best fights are still ahead of Masvidal, if that makes sense. So he does have an upside still as well. And if Iaquinta, of course, he comes out with a win here, I think obviously sky's the limit for him as well. And this would be a huge notch on his resume, no doubt about it. So for me, this has honestly been a very difficult fight to pick. I can see it going either way. Again, that's why I think the line is reasonably justified here. I am going to pick Masvidal, though, because I do think, again, he slightly has more ways to win. I don't see Iaquinta winning by submission where I can see Masvidal winning by submission. And on feet, it's going to play out pretty even back and forth type of battle. Again, I pointed out all the flaws that both of them have on the feet. So it's going to be a close fight. So my slight lean is towards Masvidal, but this is definitely a fight of the night type of candidate, and I'm looking forward to this fight.
And I've always felt that Jorge Masvidal is one of the more criminally underrated fighters in the lightweight division. He has been in there against some really talented fighters, but I don't think that he gets nearly enough respect. This might be the fight that he finally gets it. The one concern, just like it was in the Poirier fight, though, is his chin. While he hasn't been completely destroyed by strikes, he does get rocked, he does get hurt in fights, and that is something you gotta take into account. Because you look back, and Jorge Masvidal got dropped right away by Darren Cruikshank in that fight. Against Hobolov, he got blasted in the third round of that fight. So, with a guy that is as dangerous and powerful and accurate and throws enough strikes as Iaquinta, if this fight is just a pure stand-up contest, then Iaquinta has a decent shot of connecting with Masvidal's chin. Now, what's funny is, while Masvidal's chin isn't very good, his defense is actually terrific. He uses good movement, good head movement. He doesn't just come straight at you when he attacks. He's extremely technical on the feet. Sometimes technical to a fault where he just waits for his opponent to make a mistake and then tries to capitalize. But overall, I actually do give Masvidal the slight edge in terms of the stand-up here. I think he mixes it up a little bit better than Iaquinta does. I mean, when Iaquinta has somebody hurt and smells blood, he is absolutely vicious. But Masvidal mixes in knees, he mixes in low kicks, he has a great jab, and again, he is super technical. And I think what's helping put Masvidal over the top, for me at least, is the fact that he has some really solid wrestling. Again, criminally underrated wrestling that he can fall back on, and if need be. His top control is excellent. He does a really good job of avoiding submission trouble. He has a pretty good offensive submission game that you don't see very often. And overall, I do think that he is just the more complete mixed martial artist. And as Nick mentioned, you always do have to be a little worried about Al Iaquinta's fight IQ, because he does make some pretty bonehead moves in fights where he shoots in for takedowns for no reason against people that he should not be trying to take down. He should just be standing and lighting up on the feet. So I do think that Jorge Masvidal has enough advantages here that he could and should win this fight. So my pick is Masvidal. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, this is a really intriguing matchup for all the reasons you said. The stylistic factors here are extremely important. And so Masvidal, obviously, his wrestling has really gotten him through some tough spots. You mentioned the Cruikshank fight. He got dropped right out of the gates, and yet it was his wrestling that won him that fight. So he has faced dangerous strikers. He's been in trouble, and he was able to survive with his grappling. Now, technically, with his hands, he is actually pretty technical. His accuracy is very high. His defense is very good, but he doesn't have a lot of power. He's scored 2 knockdowns in a pretty sizable career to date. That's a below average knockdown rate. And he's also been dropped 3 times. Never been finished that way, but he does get dropped. So facing a guy like Iaquinta, who's young, he's powerful, he's been really hurting people in the last few fights, showing very powerful striking. That's a concern. So the question is, does Masvidal take this to the ground early, try to capitalize on Iaquinta's weakness for submissions? And that's a real threat here. So you got to zero in on the takedown defense for Iaquinta. He has now faced 33 takedown attempts in his UFC career to date. He's defended 85% of those. So he has been taken down. He has been submitted. But in terms of performance metrics here, he's actually pretty good at defending takedowns. And I would argue he's probably getting better, because of those early losses by submission have taught him a lesson. So now his hands have looked phenomenal recently, and I think just from the matchmaking, Rodrigo Dam, in theory, was supposed to be a pretty good grappler and a wrestler, and he handled that. He handled Joe Lozon, who is an excellent submission artist. Lozon was unable to get him down. And then he went toe-to-toe with Ross Pearson, who's a great striker, and really dinged him up. So 3 TKO finishes in a row for Iaquinta is very, very impressive. And Masvidal, I don't think, is the kind of guy that really should take a risk and try to stand with Iaquinta. So again, I see another stylistic mismatch here, and I think the line is close, and it should be, because whoever keeps the fight where they need it is going to be winning those rounds. I think Iaquinta is, as an underdog, is a live underdog. Masvidal maybe gets a slight edge because of his experience and because the fact that wrestling does trump other styles. But this is an interesting one to watch. If there's any divergence whatsoever, I think in the betting lines, go the other way, because this could be a coin flip. And I kind of like Iaquinta as an underdog in this spot. I would be very tentative if he was even the slightest favorite, because of Masvidal's ground game and the big weakness that Iaquinta has. But if Al defends those takedowns and puts hands on Masvidal, I think he wins this fight. So this is, both these guys are very high level, and whoever gets through this one, it has some long-term implications, since they're both already in the rankings. So this is a must-watch matchup, and I think the styles are going to make this fight.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now this brings us to the main event of the evening. We have a featherweight contest between Chad Mendes, who is 16-2, and Ricardo Lamas, who is 15-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Mendes minus 400 to come back on Lamas plus 280, and right now over 5-9 is minus 440 plus 350. So more support coming in on Mendes. A lot of parlay action, of course, and I'm not surprised that the line kind of went up. Again, it seems like most fights that I end up opening around 400, end up closing around 600, 700. So we could see this line actually fluctuate even more. I doubt it gets to that spot because Lamas deserves a lot more respect than that because he's a very talented fighter. So to be honest with you, the line's probably a tad high. But that being said, stylistically, these guys are both great. They're both well-rounded. They're both so similar in a lot of ways. But I do think that Mendes has a slight edge in this fight because, I mean, I think he packs more of a punch as far as power goes on the feet. He's got a little bit more speed. Obviously, the wrestling, I think Mendes has better wrestling to go along with it as well. I think both these guys obviously are good as far as getting chokes and submitting you that way as well. So that kind of neutralizes each other out as far as jiu-jitsu goes. So this is going to be a pretty competitive fight, but I think Mendes is probably going to land the harder shots, and I think he's going to land a little bit more often. He's probably going to get the nod here. Now, will it hit the scorecards? I'm not sure. I think in the past, I mean, you know, Lamas has been rocked, dropped. We're talking about chins. Overall, I think it's looked better recently, especially because I think he's actually at a point in his career where, again, kind of like the Masvidal fight that we were just talking about. I think Lamas is actually the best spot in his career that he's ever been. He's got the confidence going for him. He's had a couple huge wins recently. I mean, his win over Hacker and Diaz is a very solid win, probably better than a lot of people really realize. And then same thing with Bermudez. I mean, a lot of people didn't expect him to come through with the win against Bermudez, and he looks fantastic in that fight. So I think Lamas is the type of guy that really relishes the role of an underdog, and it motivates him that much more to get the job done. I mean, and you got to look at his fight against Aldo. A lot of people weren't expecting him to be as competitive as he was in that fight either. So Lamas shows up when he's a dog. So I do think he's going to show up in this spot, and he's going to make things competitive. I just think that Mendes is just a little bit better, honestly, and I think he could, if anybody stops each other here, if there's going to be a knockout, I think it's probably Mendes knocking Lamas out. And I think if it hits the scorecards, I do give the edge to Mendes as well, because I do think he's going to be able to outpoint Lamas. And that could be mixing in a takedown or two along the way, and it could be even, like I said, on the feet. I think even though Lamas has a more versed attack, I mean, by mixing in kicks and doing more things, I think Mendes can be a little bit more effective with his boxing. So my official pick, like most, is going to be Mendes here, but I do expect a pretty good fight. And it should be more competitive than I think most of us realize, but my official lean and pick is Mendes.
And to me, these are two of the most improved fighters in the featherweight division. Chad Mendes at one point was a boring top control wrestler. Ricardo Lamas, you know, he was just toiling away facing nobodies at the bottom of the division. And now they're basically the two guys that are stopping anybody from getting title shots if they're on the rise, because they both have faced Aldo for the title, and they both have failed, and the only one that really had a great fight against Aldo was Mendes at the second time around. So it's tough to just give these guys another title shot if they win. So the stakes aren't quite as high as you would expect from a 5-round main event, but I mean, when you got the number one ranked non-champion featherweight taking on the number 4 guy, you're gonna have a good fight. And overall, I think Chad Mendes does have slightly better offensive wrestling in this fight, so there's one advantage. Lamas, I think, does have the better submissions, maybe not the better guillotine choke, but everything else, I think he does have a slight edge, just because he is very sneaky on the ground. I mean, he pulled off a really impressive submission of Cub Swanson way back in the beginning of his UFC featherweight run. Now, in terms of striking, Lamas is the more diverse striker, but I'm actually very impressed with the improvements that Chad Mendes has made, where he can come in, mix things up, get in your face, and throw some serious leather. He's gained a lot of confidence in his hands, and he has some very impressive power that I don't think a lot of people ever expected him to have. And going in here against Lamas, if he connects really solidly with Lamas' chin, even though Lamas has not been hurt in a fight in God knows how long, there's a good chance that Mendes could score a knockout. Now, the same thing could happen for Lamas if he lands one of his big kicks or maybe a punch that Mendes doesn't see coming, because Mendes has been hurt several times in fights as well. Pretty much all of them have been in Jose Aldo title fights, but that does still make him a little bit more vulnerable, and it's not like his chin just is suddenly going to get way better. Now, overall, I do favor Chad Mendes to pull this one out. He is the relatively heavy favorite for a reason. The main thing is, I just think he's going to put a lot of pressure on Lamas and maybe frustrate him and fluster him and not let him use his game plan. So overall, you gotta favor Mendes here, just being the better wrestler with a little bit more power. So he is my pick. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, for those readers who checked an article just recently on the top overachievers in the UFC, Ricardo Lamas was one of those names. This guy has been an underdog in a lot of fights and has somehow come through. So I think he's the kind of guy that, for whatever reason, he flies under the radar. He had somewhat of an unlikely run to the title, and he hung in there for 5 rounds with Jose Aldo, as did Chad Mendes most recently. So this is a more even matchup, I think, than the odds imply. I can understand why there's a lot of steam behind Mendes. Team Alpha Male in general, you've got these kings of each division that look fantastic, right up to the title shot in all but one case with Dillashaw. And Mendes is one of those guys. He looks phenomenal against everybody who's not a champion. So it's hard to knock the guy. He has absolutely dominant wrestling. Here's a guy, he's never been taken down. His ground control share is just, minus the scrambles. He's basically owned everybody he's faced on the mat when he got it down. And his striking is pretty good. This is a featherweight division. You don't expect these guys to be landing everything because they're so fast. And yet Mendes has very high accuracy, north of 30%. And his striking defense is very good. So with the exception of the 2 times he got dropped by Jose Aldo, he has generally been the better striker and wrestler in the matchups. But then you've got a crafty veteran, Ricardo Lamas, and his stats aren't exceptional, and yet somehow he gets it done. Punch for punch, his knockdown rate is actually much higher than Mendes, and he doesn't really rely on his power. He uses a jab a little bit more often than Mendes does. And pace-wise, here's something to look out for. These guys are probably not going to be putting in a barn burner. I think they are both going to be very reserved. There's going to be some feeling out to stretch this out, especially early on, before either one of them commits. They are both actually used to being counter strikers. They wait for the other guy to engage. And with Mendes, he's probably looking to draw people forward and go for the takedown. But either way, this could be a staring match for the first round before they engage. But Mendes does have the tools to win this on the ground. He has the tools to land an accurate punch that could wobble Lamas, maybe set up a finish. And yet, here I am. I have trouble really chalking this up to Mendes right out of the gates because Lamas has simply surprised us so many times as an underdog and looked better than expected based on what his numbers are. So, again, I urge caution trying to play the favorite here, especially if the line continues to creep up, which it probably will, because Mendes is a huge name. So there's some caution there. I think, 3.5 rounds, both these guys are pretty durable. So maybe this does go the distance. I think the best finishing potential is probably Mendes, to get a finish. But other than that, I think generally I lean towards this one going the distance. So, I would probably ultimately pick Mendes by decision. I do see some risk based on the current prices, however.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC Fight Night 63. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out Friday afternoon following the weigh-ins. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsbreaker.com premium member. And if you'd like to become a premium member, just check the top right corner of MMAOddsbreaker.com, and there should be all the instructions right there. Now, if we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter, because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com, and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like our Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there, so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes and Countermove. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.